Okay, so we're back with another match ramble, and today, because Dynamite is tonight, I'm going to be talking about a match that made sense. We're going to be talking about AEW Dynamite Winter is Coming 2020, which is Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley for Jon Moxley's AEW Men's World title, his first reign. Now, surprisingly enough, I've only ever seen like clips of this match. I've never actually sat down and watched it, and obviously, you know, this is the birth to one of Kenny's most notorious arcs, and frankly, one of AEW's biggest arcs in terms of Kenny Omega as the belt collector, and obviously this is way before BCC with Moxley. So, this match itself straight up pissed me off. Like, it actually got me irritated. Now, it is pretty warm, so I don't know if that had anything to do with it. Probably did. But, straight up, I think what done my head in was, I will say straight up, the commentary here just, it winds me up. It really did. So, in this commentary, you had Excalibur, obviously. You had Don Callis. You had JR and Shivani, who just, oh my god, they're the two. It's just JR's just talking shit. And then Shivani's like, oh, I don't know, Tad. Like, it's fuck off. Like, oh, bro, like, Don Callis barely speaks. He's just there for the eventual stuff at the end. But just, but it really did piss me off. They just add something on a note. Like, they mentioned picture-in-picture, like it's the fucking 19th century. Like, oh my god, this is the most revolutionary thing. Like, shut up. And then the match itself just kind of like, I did watch a bit of the match on mute, I can't lie. I watched a bit of the match on mute, I had to. But, and I never normally like doing that. This is obviously pandemic era too. So this is where, like, they had crowd, but it was a very small crowd. And I feel like that definitely, like, you know, lessens the match a bit. Like, there was fans, it wasn't just the AEW locker room, it was a lot of the fans, not all of them. But, as it further went on, obviously, you know, the match itself, the crowd doesn't really become an issue. It's just that damn commentary. It's mainly JR. JR just winds me up in this. He's terrible. He's absolutely terrible. But the in-ring stuff is not the greatest either. Now, let's say, like, I don't think Kenny and Moxley have... The thing that winds me up here, to put it briefly, is Kenny and Moxley aren't allowed to just... It feels like this is the first time they've ever been in a ring with each other, and it probably is, but I mean in the sense of, like, there's no chemistry, there's none, and it's such a shame. And then the match becomes something that, like, it doesn't feel very Jon Moxley at all. It definitely doesn't feel any Kenny Omega, and it's just like, it just kind of leaves it in this midpoint of, like, well, what the hell are we doing? And, like, so the stuff's fine. Like, you know, you get a lot of V-triggers, a lot of King Kong lariats, a lot of strikes from Moxley, obviously. Kenny looking a lot more agile, obviously, compared to how he does today. But then, the match around 10 minutes in, maybe not even 10 minutes, like, I'd say around 5, 10? Like, somewhere around there, goes outside the ring for, like, 10 minutes, and it's just shit. It's just bad. And it's like... It's a shame, because I feel like the match, the match is like 30 minutes, and it's like, definitely doesn't help it, the length of the match, and the amount which they pad it out with just being, you know, outside the ring. And the outside the ring stuff isn't great. Like, a lot of it's like Kenny, like, will throw Moxley to the barriers, and then Moxley will just throw Kenny around, you know, stuff like that. And it's just like, you're watching it and you're like, Jesus, this is going on for way too long, and you're like, it's gonna end, and it just doesn't end. And then it comes like, it's nothing, like, there's not like it's not like Moxley's getting a bunch of chairs and throwing it at him. He's not. He's literally just throwing him into barricades, and that's it. And it's not really inventive. You know, Kenny does a V-trigger, a lot of V-triggers by Kenny in this. And they're not really, like, you know, creative with the moves. Frankly, this is wild to think, because it's Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley, and that's an insane deal, and they just don't really live up to that for me. And then when they eventually get back in the ring, it feels like too much time's gone to kind of build anything, and that's what kind of pisses me off. They, again, kind of do a lot of stuff with Kenny, where, like, he does the, you know, the Terminator thing, and then, you know, he does the, you can't escape, goes up for the one-winged angel, Moxley counts as the one-winged angel, and, you know, like, a bunch of shit, like King Kong lariats. There's a point where Moxley goes outside, gets chairs, and puts these chairs in the ring, and he sits down on them, and him and Kenny just have this smack off, and then it eventually turns into full fist, and then Kenny just stands up and hits a V-trigger, which was nice. It's just, the match kind of just disheartened me. It's a shame. It is a shame. So the main thing about this match is the ending. So obviously Kenny versus Moxley, and Moxley is getting, like, you know, Moxley is kind of getting the kick out on Kenny. Kenny definitely comes into his own, but, you know, it's still pretty even. And then Kenny and Moxley, I forget how, I think it might be either, you know, King Kong Larry, just Kenny throwing himself out the ring, or Moxley hitting a paradigm outside. But they hit into this massive heater, and then you got JR's dumbass going, it's very, I know, Shivani going, it's very hot. Like, yeah, it's a heater, what you want about? And then they oversell it. Like, Moxley just no-sells the heat, but then Kenny's eyes apparently fucked, and then Don Callis runs off commentary. And he's like, what the fuck? And obviously they sell Kenny and Don Callis' relationship at this point, and then, like, they sell it. And then Kenny gets back in the ring with Moxley. And then when Kenny gets back in the ring with Mox, it's a bit more like, you know, Kenny's out of it, and then Moxley's like, you know, trying to take advantage of it. He goes for the paradigm, or the Death Rider, I forget. And then Don runs up, he's got a microphone, and when he's got the microphone, he gets it, and he's like, you know, it looks like he's got something important to say. He doesn't. But, and then Moxley basically goes to attack him. Don falls on the floor, and then the ref tries to break it up. But obviously, because Don's fell on the floor, he drops the microphone. Kenny picks up the microphone and hits Moxley with it. Moxley splits open. Then Kenny obviously hits a V-trigger. Hit a beautiful, beautiful Snapdragons here, actually. I will say, Snapdragons here are probably the best moves. And then he hits a beautiful V-trigger, hits the One-Winged Angel, gets the win, and that is Kenny's first ever win as the AEW Men's World title. This is the title change. It's obviously why I picked the match, obviously leading up to tonight on Wednesday. And it's very weird. It's a very weird match. The fact that I never really thought that Kenny's first win for the title, his only reign for the title thus far, is on Dynamite. And I think that's pretty cool. The match itself is very subpar, and that's a shame, massive shame. Obviously, this bit gives birth to Kenny's heel turn, you know, as they put it on BTE, Kenny turned heel. And, you know, obviously it goes on to TNA the literal night after, where Don does the run out, which they've done twice now, which is great, you know, barely getting into that. And, you know, it's a very iconic Dynamite moment at the end of this match, it really is. But the match itself, bell to bell, is very, very disappointing. Very, and it's such a shame. Yeah, it's so hard to go back and, you know, criticize like this because it's from 2020 and, you know, they've obviously had a lot more development time. You've seen better matches from them. But it's still, like, I can imagine watching this live. Kenny versus Jon Moxley, that's like a dream match for a lot of people. You know, you realize how big that is. And then it kind of just tries to be outside the ring match with nothing going on. And then, like, you've got, like, there's a point where they go outside the ring, obviously, and then they come back, and then they choose to go outside the ring, and I literally said to myself, oh, God, no, don't do that shit. And I like, then you've got the commentary on top of it with JR and fucking Shivani. Like, there's a point where they're just talking shit, like, just pure shit. And it's like, I love it when Taz and that riff on Dynamite, like, it's funny, but, like, you know, because it's like, I'll call it a match, you know, stuff like that, but then when it's just they're talking nonsense and it's just old man who just goes as a slobber knocker. Like, bro, shut up. Like, actually shut up. Like, it just the problem with this is it really needed the big match feel. And it doesn't have it at all. It doesn't. And it is detracted from the outside the ring stuff. The crowd not being there is a massive factor. But then also just the commentary. A lot of things go into it. Just don't help it elevate to the presentation it needed. And it's a shame. Massive shame. But as a moment for Kenny winning the AEW World Championship, the men's world title, is a big deal. I like how iconic they made it with the Don stuff walking out, you know, stuff like that. And I think it's wild that I didn't actually enjoy this match. I actively never watched. I actually never liked it. I thought it could have been something greater, and obviously I've seen, you know, other matches between the two, which are much more enjoyable. But I just feel like this match, it's one of those matches where, like, you look at, like, when I talk about, for instance, Yota Tsuji versus Andrade, where it's such a wild comparison. But, like, when I go, that's the one I'm thinking of, like, I want to see this again. This is why, you know, this is one of those matches where, even if at the time I would have been like, I want to see this again. And obviously we did, and it was much better. But I just feel like, for the context of being in the time, it's a massive disappointment. But as a match, it does its service well. It obviously sets up the Belt Collector, which is one of the best runs of all time. You know, collecting, AAA, TNA, New Japan, and obviously AEW. That's 4 big belts. You know what I mean? That's huge. But, and obviously it aligns in with Don Callis. You know, it's a big turning point for not just Kenny's career, but AEW as a whole. Obviously, this sets up the Don Callis family, technically. And obviously, you know, you've got Kenny and Don consistently feuding today. You know, and obviously the Belt Collector stuff, it obviously solidifies Moxley's first reign. It does a lot. It does a hell of a lot. But I do think like I say, it is lackluster, and it's a lot of it because of the commentary, a lot of because these little, small, mitigating factors, and sometimes I feel like that's a nitpick. This one, I just don't like. I don't like it. I think a lot of it goes against, and it shows how important presentation is, because the in-ring stuff here isn't the best, but the presentation can do a lot of it, and it really doesn't help it. I'm sorry to be so negative. I don't like being negative. I expected to enjoy this match, and I never, and I just wanted I feel like a lot of people, what I've seen, people have got a lot of the same opinion on this, but it's not bad, it's just, I just don't like it, you know what I mean? Like, I just don't like it. Again, expectations may be an issue there, but it's Kenny's first win. It's Kenny's title change, obviously, for the AEW Men's World title. And, you know, hence the match against Max on Dynamite tonight, whatever. This is obviously the reason. Will this be Kenny's second win this week? Possibly. Will it be a better match than this? Almost definitely. I do believe that. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Kenny Omega versus Jon Moxley at AEW Dynamite 2020. Winter is coming for the AEW Men's World title. Let me know you thought of the match if you remember it. Let me know what you think of Kenny Omega going into Dynamite tonight. How confident are you? Do you think Kenny's going to do it? Because obviously I'm filming this 2 days before I do my Dynamite predictions and stuff. Let me know how you're feeling.